Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Wes, and I am the host of the Breaking Conservative, and I'm so happy to be joining you tonight for just kind of an impromptu show. It's Veterans Day, and it's an important day for me. It's an important day for a lot of people. I know a lot of people who follow this page are either active duty military or veterans, or they have family members who are. All of us have a lot of respect for this holiday, so I wanted to start doing more live shows, and I thought, you know what, this is the best way to do it because we can talk about that this evening. So I put together a little agenda here of some things to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the holiday, like I just said, but we're also going to talk about the election. There's so many things that are going on with that, and I think we're going to have a chance to talk about that on Sunday as well. But just because of how much things are changing and the discussions that I've been having with you guys on a day-to-day basis about it, I wanted to do this show as well to talk about that. And then I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about partisanship and just the divide that's in our country. It's really been on my heart recently. I have so many friends who are conservative, I have friends who are liberal, friends who are in between. And I just kind of wanted to talk about that. And as I see, the results of this election being played out, um, everybody seems to be on different pages about it. And I wanted to hopefully offer some clarity that can help some folks as they navigate conversations with people who may believe things that are different and be able to help you as you kind of go through the next few weeks of what to expect and where the truth actually lies, which can be hard in this environment that we're in. But before we get into that, yeah, just a big shout out to all of the veterans out there, all of the military folks who are just doing amazing work, keeping us safe. I love going through my news feed today on Facebook, looking at Instagram and Twitter, and seeing pictures of folks in uniform who are serving, who have served. A lot of people are doing pictures from when they started service, which I think is really cool. People who've been in for 18 or 19 years, they go back to when they first enlisted or they first joined or went through ROTC or went to the academy or whatever it is. So they kind of do these different then versus now stuff. Have been posting pictures of family members, parents who served, grandparents who served, friends of theirs who have served. And that's just awesome. Like, what an amazing holiday it is to be able to celebrate people who are really sacrificing for all of us. And just an awesome thing. And I wanted to talk about someone who's very dear to my heart and means a lot to me, a veteran who served and did amazing things. And a lot of people don't know about him, so I'm just going to talk about him for a minute. The guy's name is Sam Johnson. This is his book, and I'll show you a picture of Sam Johnson. So he was a congressman in the House, and before that, he was active duty in the Air Force, and he served in both Korea and Vietnam. And just an amazing guy, just an absolutely incredible dude. So let me just read for a minute from his book. Tells you a little bit about him when they were writing this book. It says Sam Johnson served 29 years in the U.S. Air Force, flying 62 combat missions in Korea before his 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. He served as director of the Air Force Fighter Weapons School, wing commander of the 31st Wing at Homestead, Florida, and Air Division commander at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, where he retired in 1979 as a command pilot. He earned 2 Silver Stars, 2 Legions of Merit, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Bronze Star with Valor, the Meritorious Service Medal, and 9 other medals, including 2 Purple Hearts. Just an amazing guy. And what happened to Sam Johnson is he was flying a mission, and they talk about it in the book, and he was essentially captured as a prisoner of war, and he spent 7 years in Hanoi, Vietnam, you know, trying to survive in just an awful, horrible environment where he was tortured. His friends were tortured. There's pictures here that an artist drew that show Sam Johnson um, trying to survive and writing in his code on toilet paper, and they would pass little scraps of that back to each other and try to hide from the Viet Cong, who were trying to figure out what they were doing and what they were trying to communicate, and they were trying to keep their morale up, and he did that, and he was the leader. Then of course he made it back, he survived, and his wife waited for him, which is a whole another amazing story, and just an amazing dude, and it meant a lot to me to be able to meet Sam. I got to meet Sam when I started working for him. So I actually went up to DC out of high school, and I got to meet Sam Johnson. This is a picture of me and Sam when I was up there in DC working with Sam Johnson. And I was just a little intern. I just graduated high school. I was about a year out of high school, and I decided to go up to DC. And they matched me up. A little service did with internships. So they said, "You're going to love this guy because you talk about going to the Air Force, West. You're going to get a chance to meet and work with this guy." And he was just an absolutely humble man. And he used to, he would come into the office and he would come into the back way. And he would stop through the back way so that he could come and see me in my little back office. And he would talk to me for like 5 minutes. And he would just be like, "Hey, how's it going? You know, how's ROTC going? Are you set on the Air Force still? Oh, that's great. Like, make sure you wear your uniform right and all that." And he would just talk to me for like 5 minutes before his aides and everything would figure out where he was, and then they would like drag him away for important bills or speeches from the House floor. This is a picture of us when we went to a conference together, which was awesome. You know, we had a great time doing that. Where he got to speak, he was a keynote speaker. This was CPAC. If for those you know who have been involved with the conservative movement, no, that's a huge conference. So back then it was a lot smaller, but Sam Johnson was a featured speaker there, so he got to speak at it, and he was doing amazing work in Congress. I went up to D.C. and I was expecting, you know, the swamp and to meet all of these people who were bureaucrats and you know unconservative and you know didn't have people's interest in mind when they were serving. And then I go up there, and the first person I meet is Sam Johnson, who was the opposite. He was, you know, just a hero, and not someone that you're probably going to hear about, not someone that you would see necessarily on Fox News all the time, even though he was doing important work. But Sam was the oldest congressman in the House as of a couple years ago. He had served 18 years, almost 19 years, and this was after, of course, all of the events that had happened in Vietnam in his 29 years of service. He gave me this book, and it says, "To West, thanks for a great job. God bless you, Sam Johnson, U.S. Congress, Texas, 2006." And it's kind of scribbled on here because he still had lasting injuries from when he was in Vietnam. There's injuries that never fully healed, and his ability to write was always a little tough for him. But he was such a happy guy. He was such a fun person to be around, and I loved it. Sam Johnson passed away in May of this year, and it has really been heavy on my heart. And so I'm going to talk about him for sure for Memorial Day, probably for years to come. But with Veterans Day, I love celebrating all the veterans, all the people who have done amazing work to keep us safe. But someone like Sam Johnson, I think, deserves it most of all because he was someone who endured an enormous amount for us. And yeah, and he was someone who was still grateful and happy. I mean, you can see him smiling right here on the cover of his book. And that's exactly the same face and attitude that he had when I was working for him almost 20 years later. So an amazing time in my life, and someone who needs it. So if you're interested, it's like we got 4 or 5 folks that are watching live. If you're interested in a copy of his book, I get nothing for this. But if you'd like to know more about Sam, you can Wikipedia Sam Johnson, and you can read all about him. Let me know if you do that. I'd love to talk to you about it and tell me what sticks out to you about his story. If you'd like a copy of the book, I would be happy to get that for a couple of our followers. I can get it off Amazon and send it to you. So just message me, and then we could talk about it. I think that'd be really fun. And it's just an amazing story of a hero who never sought the limelight, never was out there. On Fox News, really, not someone that you'd hear about, and yet he was in DC doing this great work for us, and I'm happy to be able to talk about him. So that's what Veterans Day. That's what I've been thinking about. If there's a veteran in your life, who means a lot to you, feel free to comment, on this and let me know. And again, if you're interested in hearing more about Sam, I'd be happy to answer any questions that people have about my time up there in DC with him or anything related. So feel free to message the page. Okay, so let's get into the state of the election. All right, so let's take a look at this. So It's wild. It's absolutely wild what's been happening with this election, how close the election was. For those who've been following the page for a while, I predicted about a month before the election back in September and October that it would be a tie. I thought it was going to be 269 to 269 would be the final count, and we don't actually know what the final count is going to be. But I talked about that because I was like, look, Trump's base, his supporters, conservatives, Republicans are fired up and energized. They will be voting in force. But then there's a lot of people who absolutely are disgusted with Trump, and they're going to vote against him. And they may not be all that excited about Joe Biden, but they're still going to show up. Is there going to be enough to offset what Trump's base is doing? I don't know, but it's going to be very, very close. And that's exactly what we see. And I was watching the coverage. I mean, I'm still watching the coverage of how this has played out. We did a show that was live talking about our initial reactions to this and how, the seesaw back between Trump, winning on election day, but then Biden being able to make up ground. And we try to approach it with an open mind. And in many ways, I saw some of the networks doing that the day of, the next couple of days. CNN in particular, was slow to call states like Arizona. They were initially slow to call states like Pennsylvania. They were all slow to call Alaska. But then I saw evidence of networks starting to not do this or make mistakes. And I think a big one was Fox calling Arizona for Biden very early on when the other networks didn't, and then saying, "Yep, Biden's got that." And I was like, "Really? Are we sure about that? Because it could get a lot closer." And I think they made some assumptions that have turned out to not be true. And yet Fox refuses to pull that state back, which was shocking to me that they continue to do that. So really fascinating. And then what is even more fascinating, really one of the big reasons that I wanted to put this on our agenda tonight to talk is I saw most of the major news networks, including Fox, but CNN and MSNBC especially, start to not just project that Biden was going to win, but they were starting to talk about it like he had won. It was a done deal, and there is nothing more to talk about, right? With an election this close, that was unbelievable to me. So let's talk about where we actually are. I've been following Real Clear Politics for our shows for the past several days, weeks, months. That's been one of my top sources. If you guys go back and look at all of our live shows, you will see me dropping in images from Real Clear Politics. And one of the reasons that I call it RCP, Real Clear Politics, is so good is that they take polls from numerous different places and they give you an average. They take perspectives from across the aisle, from right to left, and they put them together and they try to give you an average. Some people will say that RCP is center right. That may be the case because they may tend to lean that way in relation to liberal networks. But I would tell you that I see them as very balanced and composite. And let me prove it to you, because if you go on RCP, you will see things like this that tell you what the actual state of the race is today. Okay, so take a look at this. This is where we, no kidding, are. Take away the spin, take away people's opinions, take away networks saying, hey, this guy's a winner, hey, this guy's not, and look at where we are. And just take a minute and think about how close this is. Look at Arizona, 49.4 to 49.1. That is a 0.3 percentage difference. We're talking about 13,000 votes, 0.3%. We're not talking about a half a point. We're not talking about 1 point. We're talking about 0.3. And yet Fox was calling it, right? Was calling it. They were saying, yep, it's a done deal within a day, right? Within a day. And they didn't predict, I think, that how many people would vote for Trump through the mail. It's too close to call. It's way too close to call. When you get down below 0.5, you should not be certain that a candidate is going to win an election. Georgia, the same story. Has to be headed for a recount. 0.3. Biden, 14,000 votes. Right? North Carolina, I can see. But notice that many networks have not called North Carolina, and we're looking at 2.5. So how are you going to call Arizona but not call North Carolina? It's inconsistent, you know. in terms of your methodology, which I don't agree with to begin with, but it's too close to call. There's still 3% reporting left in North Carolina. It's probably going to go Trump. And if you want to say, we predict that North Carolina is going to go for Trump, we think that's what's going to happen, let's wait and see. And I heard that from CNN so much on election night. We think that Pennsylvania is going to go for Biden, but let's wait and see. When did that shift from let's wait and see to over and done? Right? Over and done. It's not over and done. Pennsylvania, 3% left, 0.8 is the difference here. A margin of 51,000 votes by Biden, 0.8 difference there. This is an unbelievably close election, and an enormous amount of work is being done. What RCP did, and there was some controversy in this. People think that RCP did what all the other networks did and went ahead and called the race for Biden, said it's over and done, and then backtracked and said, no, it's 259. The reality is that RCP was one of the only major sources of political news who did not call the race for Biden at any point. And you can go on their website, you can listen to their president talking about this. He's done videos and tweets and everything else to say, listen, everybody else was so sure. We waited because it was so close, and we've been watching that. So this is what RCP has been showing consistently for several days now, that Biden and Harris are at 259, Trump, Pence are at 217. Does it mean that Trump's going to win? Does it mean that the race is about to be decided in the next couple days or even weeks? No, it doesn't. But because the race is so close, RCP has been reluctant to make calls when you get down to less than a couple percentage points, and especially when you get within 1 percentage point. So good on them for that. If you want a news source, again, it's where I go. It's good stuff, and it tells you the reality of where we're at. Now, when we get into some other aspects of this election, we talk about fraud and things like that. How widespread is fraud in this election? That's another thing where I see many news networks have already made up their mind. There's no fraud. Why would we even look into this? It's a conspiracy theory, right? Or on the other end, there's massive amounts of fraud, right? And the election projections are going to completely change because of it. We don't know that. We don't know exactly how much has occurred. Every state has slightly different systems in terms of how they count votes, of when they start counting, what they've allowed, what they don't allow. Pennsylvania has a long history of corruption in its electoral politics, especially at the state and local level. There are lawsuits that are being filed against these. Some of them seem to have merit, a lot of them don't, right? But there's just this flurry of activity, and I think that people need to have an open mind about it. I don't think that they need to make assumptions, especially when it's their side that has something to gain by their assumptions being proven true. There are people saying Trump is going to win, and we're absolutely sure of it, and here we go, and this fraud is going to prove it. That is not an open mind at all, right? And then there are people who are saying that there's no semblance of fraud, there's no possibility of fraud, it cannot be widespread, and nothing's going to change. We don't know those things. That is what is being decided at the court level. And so when we get back to it, this is really what we're looking at. This is what we're looking at in terms of our election. People want to make claims and things like that. They're certainly willing, open to do that. But just because, say, some state has a particular software issue, until it's proven that it's systemic, don't believe that it is, right? And this goes back to the previous election in 2016, where people wanted to say, oh, there was Russian collusion or there was Russian interference in the election. Until it's systemic, right? Until it's proven to be massive, we shouldn't assume that it is. And it goes the same thing with election fraud. There is fraud in every single election. It happens. There are mistakes that happen. There are all kinds of things that can occur because people are people, and they're doing the best that they can do with what they have. And people can be prone to make mistakes. It happens to everybody in their life, is that you intend to do one thing, you do another. That happens in elections, as well as people who are trying to take advantage, stuffing ballots, that type of thing. How widespread is it? That's what the courts decide. It's not what the media decides. It's not what you and I decide. It's not what Trump or Biden decides. It's going to come down to the investigations in the courts and what they prove. And so we have to be open-minded about it. So that is the current state of the election. So try to cut through some of the spin that's out there, the pure opinion, and again, look back at things like these numbers that come from actual certified results, and then pay attention to the deadlines that are approaching, especially in December when states have to vote. So I think that goes a long way towards the last topic that I have for you guys tonight, which is the partisan divide. And this has been something that's been growing and growing and growing. There has always been a partisan divide in this country for one reason or another, going back to the founding fathers who worried about partisanship in political parties. But I've had many people on the page who are asking me, saying, hey, Wes, has it gotten worse? Is the state of partisanship in our country worse than it's ever been? Has it gotten worse in our lifetimes? You know, people second guessing themselves, thinking, I think it has, but I'm not sure. And I would tell you what I see in our country is people operating from very different worldviews. It goes back to the notion of vision. And what is our vision of this country? What do we believe about this country? And is it in such a way that there is a place for people from the opposing side? Do they have standing? Do they have the right to be able to articulate their opinions? And increasingly, what I think that we see is people are not giving the other side an opportunity to speak, a right to speak, and they are quick to be able to say, this person has the worst motives possible. On our show, we feature conservatives, being a conservative show, but we also feature moderates, liberals, libertarians from across the spectrum. We engage with people across the spectrum for a reason, because we believe you all have standing, even if we absolutely disagree. And I think what we have to get back to in this country is a notion that both liberals and conservatives have standing. One of the things that conservatives, I think, have started to listen to and start to believe is that everything that has been done by conservatives is good, and everything that has been done by liberals has been bad. And I would tell you, as a conservative, I want to fight for what I believe and the people who believe it, but to presume or to articulate or to argue that no liberal has ever done anything good for this country is just blatantly untrue. To articulate, to believe, to argue that there weren't some semblance of liberals there from the beginning in America is just untrue. What has made America great has been the dialogue, the discussion between people who believe very different things, going back to the original founding fathers, the Constitutional Congress, the people who came from different states, who argued and debated with each other and tried to hash out a government where people could discuss things, where interests were against interests, but they still had to come together. That's the structure of government we have. We don't have a government that said, listen, everybody has to be right-wing for this to work. We have a government that recognizes that all people struggle, all people have wrong ideas at some time or another, and that we need competing interests, going back to James Madison, to balance that out. Okay? Which means that you're going to have liberals, moderates, and conservatives all part of this. And I think that in the conservative movement today, there are many people who would try to ride out every single person who is not a conservative from any place in America, right? And then there are people on the left who are doing the same thing, who want to believe that every single conservative has bad motives. I saw a post from Andrew Yang, who ran for the Democratic Democratic nomination for president, and he was saying we have to look at who conservatives are, why they believe what they believe, why so many of them voted for Donald Trump, and what that means for our country and for our party. And people responded to Andrew Yang and said, well, they're all racist. The question's answered, right? There are people on the camp of the left who are writing out every conservative as a racist, and it's just untrue. So what we have to do in this country is to figure out a way to be able to restart the conversation, to be able to open up being patriotic, being a lover of this country, to more than just a single belief system. Susie's on here. I want to bring your comment on because I do want to engage with you guys and hear what you have to say. So, all right, Susie. Susie says, I think the opposite. And again, I respect, your opinion. Let's talk about it. I'm in conversation, and every tweet and media thing I see is bashing me. I'm a racist. I'm a deplorable. I'm selfish. I'm in a Trump cult group. That's what I'm talking about, Susie, with the Andrew Yang thing. Is that Andrew Yang running for president? Obviously didn't win. Biden won. And he is a person who says, I want to understand what the appeal is for Trump supporters. And there are liberals who say exactly what you're saying to him. Within liberals, there are some like Andrew Yang who want to understand you, who want to relate to you, who want to talk to you. And then there's a whole bunch of them who want to say exactly what you're saying. They want to bash people, say that you're racist, you're deplorable, selfish, you're in a Trump cult group. One of the things that we do on this show, Susie, is I have a liberal come on the show. I have a libertarian come on the show and we talk about it. And what I try to do is explain to them the appeal of Trump to them in ways that I hope they can understand. It doesn't mean that they agree, but I'm like, listen, there is more going on here than you are giving credit to Donald Trump because a lot of times on the show, I'll have Chris, who's the liberal, on here, and he will say, I'm so focused on Donald Trump's tweets, and I can't agree with the way that he talks and the way he tweets. And what I say to that, Susie, is I'm like, well, listen, man, there's more going on than just his tweets. There are a whole lot of conservatives who, me and myself included, who don't like the way that Donald Trump tweets, right? But that's not why most of them like him. Why they like him is because he's delivered conservative justices, right, to the Supreme Court when previous Republican presidents gave us moderates. They didn't give us conservatives. He's done things like secure foreign deals with Saudi Arabia, with India, with numerous other countries that have brought jobs and economic gain to this country. Okay, there are numerous different things. He's kept us out of foreign wars in ways that George Bush definitely did not. There are things that you can look at with Trump beyond his tweets and what Chris is focused on that is an appeal. Again, it doesn't excuse some of the things that he wants to bring up, but it shows there's more going on here than writing off half the country as racist. There's nothing racist with Trump making deals with other foreign countries that are beneficial to them and us. There's nothing wrong with him keeping us out of foreign wars. There's nothing racist about a judge like Kavanaugh or Gorsuch or Barrett, right? Like there's not that is the appeal. Susie says, got your other comment here that you love the show and you've watched for a long time. That warms my heart. I love that. And thank you for sticking with me because a lot of times, if we think the opposite, I think a lot of, I'm just trying to get to where you're at in terms of a point and I may be getting there. But what I would say, Susie, is it is not fair for liberals to write out conservatives from this country and to say that we're racist because this country from the beginning was about being better than that. Thomas Jefferson and what he wrote, what John Adams and Benjamin Franklin put together was trying to put in a weapon against slavery and racism from the beginning. That is where the equality comes from. And so this country has been about being better than, frankly, the rest of Western society, the UK and everything else was at the time, and setting us on a course to be able to eliminate racism, which took, decades and decades and is still in some ways going. But conservatives cherish that. They love that. There is more to them than that. So it's not fair for liberals to do that to us, but it's also not fair to do that to liberals. The liberal who says, oh, well, they're all racist and that's it. Yeah, I'm going to disagree with that person. And I'm going to say that's the type of liberal that needs to grow up and meet some conservatives and realize that they're not racist. But for every liberal that I've encountered that's like that, there are also liberals like Andrew Yang and others who are trying to understand. Again, Chris comes on this show and we discuss this. There are liberals out there, I've known many in the military, who are willing to discuss their belief system, who are coming at this just with different priorities, different things that matter to them, and making some wrong judgments, but they're willing to talk about it. That's where we need to meet. That's where we can say not all liberals are the same. There are some that can talk to us and there's some that can't. And when we write off the entire movement, we're not doing this the way the founders intended. Because if people just write each other off, then the entire system of government that was created for us, the Constitution, all that was set for us to discuss, is not being adhered to and followed. And if that's what we're trying to conserve, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's hard to do. It takes a lot of work, Susie. It really does. That's what I try to do here as often as I can. But how do we heal this partisan divide? We've got to find people who don't fall into the sensationalism, the stereotypes, and all of that. And that's the kind of thing what I'm getting back to. So when I show you things like this RCP map, when I try to give you an idea of where the vote count actually is, I think we have to recognize, Susie, and for anybody else who's watching, that there is a whole host of people who are trying to drive us to the extremes. That's what I was trying to say here. This is a very sane and calm map that tells you where things are at. And the states that are called here, it's clear. It's clear that Florida is going for Trump. It's clear that Texas is going for Trump. It's clear that Alaska is going for Trump. Why they waited so long to call that, I don't know. California is going blue. Okay, Virginia, looked like it was going for Trump for a while. It's going to go blue, and it's not that close. Okay. This is but you know what this doesn't do? It doesn't always capture our attention. It doesn't always rise to the top of our newsfeed because the network that goes out there and makes a wild prediction, the one that is quick to call a winner and to say we're the first to call it and we were right, that's the one that tends to go to it. We have to say no to that. Just like we have to say no to the one that wants to castigate every single person in a belief system as one way or the other. People are more complicated than that. Their belief systems are more in flux than that. And some people are, not all, some people are open to the conversation. That's where we try to have them on this show. So that's my take on the partisan divide. It's something that I could talk about all night. I appreciate your comment, Susie. Thank you for giving me the benefit of the doubt and let me explain where I was coming from on that. My last thing is, most of you guys know that I'm a Christian. I talk about church a lot on the show, especially with John. And I would tell you, it is complicated trying to be a Christian in the world that we live in today. It is difficult to figure out how to be kind and generous and gracious every day when we've got so many people pulling us to the extremes, when we've got so much going on in our society that is based not in those values. I would tell you guys that there is a difference between being innocent and being pure. And that's something that we talk about a lot in the studies that I go to and the church that I go to, is someone who's innocent can be naive. Someone who's pure is good by choice. And that's hard to be pure in today's world. It's hard to be good by choice when there's so many negative influences. And that's one of the reasons I do this show. That's one of the reasons that John does it, is we're trying to find, what does generosity look like in politics? What does kindness look like in politics? It can't be this naive, innocent, type of ethics where you just think that everything's just rosy. I got to tell you, when I met Sam Johnson, I was pretty naive. Okay, I didn't know much about politics. I didn't know much about who was in it. I'd heard some things, and I met this guy. And if you want to talk about someone who is not naive, who's not closed off to how difficult the world can be, look at this. Look at this man. Take a look at his book, and that's what I want to close on. Is someone who's been through it all, someone who has seen the very worst of human nature, someone who had every reason to be bitter and mean and angry. God, why did you let me spend 7 years in prison? Why did I have to go through this when other people didn't? Why did my plane get shot down when I didn't do anything wrong? Why didn't I get rescued quicker? Why did I have to spend all this time, nearly a decade away from the country that I love, my wife, my family, all of that stuff? This was a guy who wrestled with those things and decided to trust God, and someone who decided to make the most of his situation. And that's what you see him scribbling in his prison cell, coming up with a code that others could use to maintain morale. Someone who never compromises his integrity, even in the worst conditions. And that's why he's got a smile on his face, right? That's why he had a smile on his face hanging out with me. He was someone who had figured out how to be a Christian in politics. He's someone who was excelling at it. And he's not someone that you were going to mislead, and he's not someone who was weak in any sense. How do we get there? How did we get there? I'm still trying to figure it out. But I appreciate you guys being on this journey with me as we do that. Love your comments. Thank you, Susie, for throwing that down for me. For those of you that watch this, please send us a message. Let us know what you think. If there's topics that you want me to include, I'd be happy to put them on the agenda. I love doing a show like this as long as we're getting interaction and it's worth your while. Don't forget to look at theberkingconservative.com, our website, our YouTube channel, The Berking Conservative. You type that in, it should come right up. We're on Twitter as The Berking Con. And then, of course, we're here on Facebook as well, doing this as often as we can. So you guys have a great Veterans Day. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you Sunday when we do our next show.